Good afternoon. I hope you've enjoyed your day. It's certainly been a powerful 2 days for me so far. I'm here for the 3 days. And you may ask why I've not been around the Step Change leadership team or the workforce engagement teams for the last couple of years. It's because I'm now working internationally. But trust me, the challenges in workforce engagement and HSE performance are much less mature than they are here. And I can learn a lot by coming here for 3 days. So for those of you who don't know me, and I hope there's not too many of you, I'm VP for International Operations for Rapture. But today I'm going to give you a story or a talk on a survivor's experience from Piper Alpha. The slides will show you, this first slide shows you what Piper looked like almost the day I went to work on it. Before we get there, I'm going to set some scene, give some context. As the 25th anniversary approaches, I find myself once again privileged to be afforded the opportunity to give a brief but hopefully powerful and meaningful message to assist in bringing this day to a close. So if I can have your full attention for the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'd appreciate it. That's what I'm about to talk about. I haven't talked about in 25 years, and it's very personal. And as you can imagine, it's about the night 25 years ago, almost to the day. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with my story, I would like to begin by sharing a brief summary of my early years offshore in order to set the scene. I started offshore in the early 80s and spent my first few years as a maintenance electrician. This saw me working on the Montrose Alpha, Bray Alpha, all the Brents, all the Forties, and the MCP01 gas pumping station, which has been decommissioned and is gone now. Following this, I transferred onto the drilling side of the business, or the dark side, as many of you may refer to it as. And I went to work in the North Alwyn during the start-up operations in 1985. I left Alwyn in January 1988 to go to Beatrice. Beatrice is ironically the twin rig that came off of Piper some years before. And in May 1988, I transferred on to Piper Alpha. So during these early years of my career, I had the opportunity to see firsthand production and drilling platforms, some old, some new, and you could say I'd gained enough insight to know what to expect when I went to any platform in the North Sea. So now I've set the scene, I want to take you to my main part of the talk, where I will share with you my initial thoughts on my arrival on Piper Alpha in May, and also during the 3 months prior to that night on the 6th of July. I have 7 points, and the first one, on my arrival, I looked at Piper Alpha on arrival and thought, wow, it looks pretty old and tired. In fact, it was only 12 years old, so it wasn't old at all when you think about where we are now with some of our platforms. And if you think old and tired, you think asset integrity. And I didn't think about asset integrity all those years ago, but that's what we're talking about now. It's what you should all be educated on. My thoughts were, it may look run down, but we're still in operating order. And we had a drilling campaign to do, and that would keep me employed for at least a year. The second point was, it was obvious that additional structures and modules had been added over the 12-year period. Had been converted from oil to gas, had additional living quarters added. Think management of change in modern terms. My thoughts were, many of the older platforms I had previously worked on had also been added to. I'm sure it will have been well designed and engineered and installed. Why wouldn't it be? My third point, in particular with the additions around the accommodation, it made it somewhat confusing to navigate around, and in fact, somewhat of a rabbit's warren. Think emergency escape and rescue and preparedness in modern terms. My thoughts were, I'll get used to it. I just accepted that that was the way it was. And I never really thought about it anymore. I just made my way around it. And when I was thinking about this last night, I couldn't actually recall ever being given an induction and a tour of how to get to the escapeways and the accommodation on Piper Alpha. My fourth point is that during nights, because I always worked nights on Piper Alpha, there was very few people around, in particular around the control room area, where I had to go for permit work and so on. I recall quoting to my relief one morning, "It's like a ghost town down there. There's no one around." Think control of work in modern terms. How was it? My thoughts on that was, well, if there's no one around, I guess I'll just come back later, and maybe someone will sign off my permit for me. My fifth point, there were times, and if people in the room ever were on Piper, they'll understand this, there were times when Piper vibrated significantly. In fact, it almost felt like it was going to shake to pieces. Again, think asset integrity. My thoughts were, I just accepted that it must be okay, or someone from the process group would have done something about it. After all, I was a driller. What did I know about production? My sixth point, or observation that I didn't report, the airlock doors from the main deck to the office block were very rarely closed. Think temporary refuge, protection in an emergency. My thoughts were, it took a lot of effort to close these doors due to imbalance of pressure, but hey, you could eventually close them. It wasn't a big deal. And now I come to my seventh point, and if there are drillers in the room, they'll resonate with this point. Us drillers were very much left to our own devices. We had our own power, we had our own isolation procedures, and we had our own lockout system. And we had our own maintenance team. We didn't depend on anyone. Think control of work and communication in modern terms. My thoughts on this were, our systems were our systems. We could operate independently. We had our own diesel engines. We also had an emergency generator. If the lights went out, our maintenance team would fix it and we'd be back up and running. We were independent. What went on downstairs didn't really affect us. So I must add that this is just my thoughts, which I've never really shared with anyone. But I know 25 years on, they were my thoughts. And I wasn't intending to pick out any one in particular systems. So now, let's take us to the evening of the 6th of July, or the day of the 6th of July. I arrived on board and went straight to bed, as I was working nights. I got up and went to work at 6 p.m, did my handover, did my normal business, routine stuff. And at 10 p.m, I happened to be on the drill floor when the first and initial explosion took place. We all looked at one another, very confused. By 5 minutes past 10, there was black, acrid smoke blowing across the pipe deck. I recall we had to duck under it to leave the drill floor. We headed for the office block, and on the way, established that already there was no access to the lifeboats, in particular via the external walkways. How did we know this? We met the BA team coming back, and they told us the passageways were impassable due to black, thick, acrid smoke. By 10 minutes past 10, I had split from the crew and was now on my own, having decided not to follow my tow pusher's instructions. He had advised me to go to the muster point through the accommodation. To this day, I'm not sure why I took that decision, but I do remember the corridors were already filling up with smoke. By gut instinct or by pure chance, whichever or both, this decision may have saved my life that night. By 10:15, I had made my way back onto the drill floor, not really knowing what to do or where to go. There I was joined by a work colleague, and due to the lack of options, we decided to make our way down off the drill floor to the lower decks, and then started scrambling around the decks, looking for an escape route. By 10:20, we had made our way from the drill floor to the skid deck, where we witnessed small pool fires across the entire module. By 10:30, possibly 10:40, we had travelled as far as we possibly could away from the fire, and ended up perched on a small access platform directly beneath the flare boom. on the northeast corner. Catching our breath, we both realised that there was no way to escape other than to jump. The only problem we had was we were about 80 feet above the water. As we stood there, we watched the wellhead deck be consumed by fire, following explosion after explosion, each one seeming to come closer towards us. All that was going through my head was the thought of jumping from 80 feet. It was never recommended in any survival training I did. At 10:45, we could wait no longer. We took our work boots off. We emptied our coverall pockets, like that would make a difference from 80 feet. We went over the handrail and prepared to jump. There was one almighty explosion. One of the gas mains ruptured. My colleague jumped first. I waited till he surfaced, and then I jumped. I hit the water hard, feet first, and took what seemed like an eternity to come to the surface. I was off, and I was alive. Thank God, but where was my colleague? As I swam away from the burning platform, there was another almighty explosion. I believe the Tartan gas riser had just went, which sent a fireball down and across the sea towards us. I ducked into the sea, surfacing soon after before trying to swim upwind away from the platform. I had lost all track of time by now, and looking back, I could only see the platform completely engulfed in flames. Turning around, I could see two supply vessels moving in my direction. They looked colossal in dimensions from the sea surface. I thought to myself, oh my God, I have escaped from the burning platform and survived the jump, and now these vessels are going to come right over the top of me without noticing. Little did I know they had seen us both jump and were in the process of coordinating a rescue. Once on board, thanks to the marine crews and the Manila rope, I just wanted to know where my colleague was and that he was safe. Thankfully, he was already on board and down below in the shower, trying to get the hypothermia out of his system. After some time, I recall going to the bridge of the vessel, and the heat inside the wheelhouse was incredible. It was almost unbearable. Thankfully, I had been rescued. Unfortunately, many others that night would not be. I'm going to stop my personal account of that night right there, as this is not intended to be my story of escape, rescue, and the aftermath. I just felt that to make my message personal and powerful enough to have a lasting effect, it would be purposeful to me to share my experience 25 years ago, which I've never done publicly. So during my opening remarks, I provided details of my initial thoughts on Piper. With them, I tried to highlight where I had the opportunity to intervene, or at least observe and report on many different parts of the installation. I should have communicated these concerns and my observations to those who were responsible for the safety and well-being of some 226 people on board that night, and for that matter, every night before. In my case, I choose to do nothing about what I had observed on my short time on Piper Alpha prior to that night. I have thought long and hard to myself on countless times, and I can't help but ask myself, would it have made a difference if I had? So in closing, I want to leave you with the same message I left with the audience 5 years ago when I did this at several events in the 20th anniversary. It's a fact that your personal safety, and for that matter, the personal safety of others in the industry, are inexplicably linked to the behaviours and work practices of you, your colleagues, your supervisors, and your managers. And you should never feel that you can't make a difference. It's by personal choice that you either intervene and report or choose to look the other way. So I ask once again that you make the most of these opportunities to intervene or report. And I want to remind each and every one of you to always remember that the choices you make, and I'm going to emphasise, because it's worthwhile that they are choices you make, have the potential to affect the safety and lives of those that you may not know or ever know. Further, never accept that the behaviours and decisions of others is something that you cannot influence. Go to work with the belief that you are safety leaders, and never compromise the belief that by letting others who may be new to you, senior to you, or in fact colleagues of yours, convince you otherwise. Be relentless in your approach to ensuring that your personal safety and that of the entire workforce is prominent in your mind every day. Thank you.